Order in the court. The gavel crashed down like a clap of thunder, rattling the wooden bench and stilling the turbulent crowd. The noise was not a mere command. It was a threat. From the time on, every breath, every whisper, every glance had meaning. Reporters surged forward, pens scratching across notebook paper, cameras flashing so rapidly it seemed lightning had entered the courtroom. Microphones protruded from the aisles like a metal forest of branches, all vying to catch history being made. Because this was no regular trial. This was the trial of Kody Brown. Once the proud man who had presented himself to the world as the father of sister wives, and now sitting on trial with his reputation in shambles. Kody sat at the defense table, his jaw clenched, his former confident eyes scanning the room with a nervous tick. His iconic curls, the signature style that fans had fought about for decades, appeared rumpled, nearly worn out, as if they bore the burden of decades of secrets. He was not in the comfort of his living room, delivering a monologue to cameras. He was not master of this scene. Here in the courthouse, he was a man laid bare. The wives sat behind him, scattered like pieces of a shattered mirror once whole. Christine leaned forward, her arms crossed, her face unyielding. Janelle gripped a notepad and pen as though prepared to write down every word, her mind razor-sharp and calculating. Meri sat rigid, her eyes blazing with anger, and something that resembled relief, as if she had waited decades for this time. And then Robin, who was nearest Kody, whose hand fluttered sometimes as if she yearned to touch him, to reassure him, but who even she didn't know what to do, torn between loyalty and terror. The atmosphere between them wasn't oneness. It was separation, it was tension, it was betrayal hanging there dense enough to strangle. The prosecutor stood up slowly, purposefully, his chair scraping the floor with a shriek that made everyone wince. He smoothed his tie, looked at the jury straight on, and then nodded toward Kody. His voice was crisp, forceful, each syllable designed to strike like a fist. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about religion. This case is not about family disputes. This case is about betrayal. It is about manipulation. It is about a man who promised unity, preached trust, demanded loyalty, and then utilized that very same loyalty to conceal lies, to channel money, to construct an empire on secrets, while the very individuals who stood by his side were left in the dark. Gasps broke out from the gallery. A reporter breathed too loudly. Did he just say funnel money? The judge banged the gavel again, demanding silence, but the harm was already done. Instantly the mood changed. Everyone leaned forward, starved for more. The audience wasn't watching a trial. They were watching the first act of a drama larger than TV, larger than tabloids. This was life, and stakes were greater than Kody had ever dealt with before. Kody pressed the table edge with white-knuckled fists. He longed to protest, to rise from his seat, to yell that this wasn't the truth, that his actions were all for his family. But the forceful hand of his lawyer on his arm held him in place. This was no longer his playing field. He couldn't dictate the cuts, couldn't spin the narrative to his advantage. Here, the truth, or at least as much of it as the prosecution had presented, would determine everything. The prosecutor spoke in silence like a knife. For years, Kody Brown flaunted his family on television, displaying to the world what he referred to as plural marriage, a family bound by religion and love. But behind the cameras, behind the meticulously edited scenes, there was a man brokering deals, secreting bank accounts, and unfairly apportioning resources. His wives were assured equal love, equal opportunity, equal dreams. But what they got were shattered promises, preferential treatment, and fiscal betrayal. Christine's head tilted slightly, her lips tightening, as if those words validated everything she had shouted in the years before she left. Janelle scribbled furiously, jotting down phrases to hold on to later, her pen pressing so hard it nearly tore the paper. Meri's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away from Kody, not for a second. Robin sat frozen, her face pale, her chest rising and falling faster with every accusation hurled. The prosecutor moved slowly to the jury box, speaking in a low voice. "We will reveal the evidence. Late-night bank transfers. Real estate transactions around Coyote Pass kept secret from the other wives. Documents that confirm money was transferred. Money that was not his alone, but money that was the family's. He paused, allowing the words to settle. And we will demonstrate to you how every dollar, every decision, every inch of that property was slanted towards one person. Robin, that name, Robin, rattled in the air like thunder. People turned their heads, eyes flicked, and whispers burst out once more. Robin cowered in her chair, dropping her eyes, but everyone present had already witnessed her response. The judge slammed the gavel again, annoyance evident in his tone. Silence, or I will clear this courtroom. The room fell silent, but the tension still hung. Kody leaned over to his lawyer, speaking harshly under his breath. His words weren't audible, but his neck veins throbbed, his rage boiling. His lawyer nodded ever so slightly, but Kody couldn't hide the look of panic on his face. This wasn't the type of charge he could talk himself out of on a confessional couch session. These were hard numbers. Legal papers, actual evidence. The prosecutor made his way back to his table, piling up his papers in neat stacks, his actions smooth and measured. That of a man who already knew that he was going to win. He glanced again at the jury. This trial is about truth. It is about promises made and broken. It is about a family who believed in one man, and the lies that man told them while the cameras rolled and the world applauded. By the time we are done with this case, you will have seen the true Kody Brown, not the TV one. Not the one who preached love and faith, but the one who employed love as a disguise and faith as a weapon. We will demonstrate that he did not just betray his family, but the very principles he professed to uphold. The words fell like a cannon. Slowly Kody drew in a breath, his chest rising with effort, his gaze flicking toward the jury, searching for any glimmer of sympathy. But their eyes were like stone walls, waiting to be cracked open by proof. As the judge requested a brief recess, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Journalists sprinted for the exits, dashing to report headlines to the outside world. Secret bank accounts. Coyote Pass betrayal. Kody Brown in court. The pandemonium outside intensified, chants and flashes of cameras spilling out through the courthouse windows. Within, the wives shifted uncomfortably. Christine spoke under her breath to Janelle, their eyes narrowed and intense. Meri sat quietly, her hands clenched tightly, as if praying for justice. Robin finally edged closer to Kody, speaking something none of the others could hear, her lips shaking, her words intended only for him. And Kody sat there, stone still, his mind whirling. He'd weathered family uprisings, public criticism and media attention before. But this was something else. The gavel had dropped, and with it the facade was unraveling. The first day was just getting started, and already the walls of his meticulously constructed empire were beginning to crack. Each groan of the courtroom bench, each whisper of the gallery, each icy glance from the jury, was a reminder the world wasn't witnessing the Kody Brown he had hoped to present to them. They were witnessing the man he had attempted to conceal. And as the judge returned, bringing the gavel back up for round 2, Kody understood something disturbing. This was not a trial. This was a reckoning. The courtroom air was thick the second the prosecutor stood. He didn't move in a hurry. He allowed the silence to hang until each of the jurors, each spectator, and each camera lens locked onto him. Then, with a swift motion, he picked up a thick pile of papers off his desk and bore them to the front as if they were a weapon. The thud of papers on the lectern reverberated throughout the room, loud and shocking, like the report of a gunshot in the middle of church. Folks winced. Even the judge arched an eyebrow, unfazed but unmistakably attentive. These, the prosecutor stated, his voice slicing through the tension, are records, bank transfer records, pen property exchange records, records never made public by Mr. Brown, records that reveal the real man standing before the public face. He paused, his eyes scanning the room, until his focus found Kody, the man who told his wives he would treat them equally while keeping money in the shadows. The room was filled with gasps. A woman in the gallery breathed, "Oh my God," and another mouthed, "I knew it." The judge rapped for order, but the ripple of whispers lingered like white noise in the room. Christine's lips parted in small tightness, her chest heaving as if she'd been holding it in. She leaned forward toward Janelle, murmuring something biting that forced Janelle's pen to write harder on her notebook. Meri kept her eyes ahead of her, her expression impassive, but her hands tied into knots together, revealing the tempest raging within her. Robin's hand jerked on her lap, her eyes big, struggling to contain the tears on the verge of falling. The prosecutor strode over to the jury box, holding aloft a single sheet of paper. "Exhibit A," he declared. The clerk displayed it on the big courtroom screen. Numbers flashed, lines of transactions scrolling on the screen like black and white confessions. The jurors leaned in, their eyes scanning as they read the proof. "Take note of this transfer," the prosecutor went on, tapping with a pen. $25,000 transferred from a joint family account to one in Kody Brown's own name. No approval, no consent by the other wives, no disclosure. He stood there making the silence bite. That is not family unity. That is theft of trust. Kody pounded his hand on the table, his voice rising. "That's a lie. That money was for tax. It was for the property." His outburst was raw and desperate, ringing in the room before the judge's gavel came down again. "Brown, you will hold your tongue until it is your time to speak," the judge commanded severely. Kody slumped back, his face reddened, his jaw muscle tightly clenched. The prosecutor never even blinked at the interruption. He came close to smiling. "The truth hurts, doesn't it, Mr. Brown?" he replied levelly, before speaking again to the jury. "But figures don't lie." The next slide rolled up. Another account, another transfer, another inexplicable shift of money. This isn't a one-shot deal, this is a pattern of dishonesty done over years. He preached family togetherness, and created a personal fiefdom. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Each slide was another blow, each number another chip in the defense's armor. Christine could take it no more. She muttered loudly, "I knew it. I knew he was keeping secrets." The gallery stared at her, the cameras recording every flash of rage on her face. The judge cautioned, "Mrs. Brown, quiet in the gallery," but Christine's glare remained trained on Kody. He wouldn't meet her eye. The prosecutor switched to property records. Maps of Coyote Pass flashed on the screen, outlines of land tracts with names drawn. "This land," he declared, his voice unflinching, "was the dream, the promise he held out to his wives for years." But as he spoke of justice, he negotiated deals to favor one household, one wife, one scheme. He traced the plots with a red pen, lingering theatrically over the section drawn under Robin's name. And the other wife had nothing but leftovers. Or worse, nothing at all. The murmuration in court intensified again. Janelle pushed forward, scrutinizing the maps as though she were observing them anew in reality, her eyebrows knotting together. Meri breathed out slowly, a near shake of her head, as though the validation of her fears still hurt. Robin's expression twisted. She muttered something to herself, though no one could discern. The prosecutor stood before the jury. "You will see that these transactions weren't errors. They weren't accidents. They were intentional. Each contract, each signature, each transfer says the same thing." Kody Brown was not defending his family. He was defending himself. One of the jurors shifted uncomfortably. For the first time his pen tapping on the desk. It was small, but it was there. The evidence was taking root. Kody's attorney jumped up, objecting. "Objection, Your Honor. The prosecutor is editorializing. This is a family conflict, not a fraud case." He's spinning emotional tales to influence the jury. The judge pondered for a moment before answering. "The jury will determine what is fact and what is interpretation." Objection overruled. The prosecutor switched around with fresh passion. "Emotional? Yes. But betrayal is emotional. Picture dedicating your life, your money, your very sense of self, to a man who offers equality, only to find he was cheating against you. That's not just emotional, that's heartbreaking." He took a step back, motioning to the wives. "You will see for yourselves. You will see their voices, their pain, their testimony. And when you do, you'll know this isn't just a busted-up marriage. This is a busted-up system designed by one man for his own benefit." Kody shifted once more, growling under his breath, his eyes darting frantically at the jury. His attorney jotted down furious notes, whispering tactics. But Kody scarcely heard him. The world was watching. The walls were closing in. The tension thickened to the point where you could almost hear the pounding of hearts. Every fan, every journalist, every juror sensed it. It was no longer about money and property. It was now about trust and betrayal, and the shattering of the image Kody had built over years for millions of viewers. The prosecutor snapped his folder shut. Ladies and gentlemen, this is only the tip of the iceberg. The papers will speak louder than any defense, and soon enough, the voices of those betrayed will complete the picture. The judge ordered recess, the gavel ringing a second time. The ensuing roar was like a bomb exploding. Reporters dashed for the doors, phones held to ears, voices spewing headlines into the world beyond. Secret bank accounts exposed. Coyote Pass scandal, Kody Brown caught in court. Within, the wives didn't stir. Christine glared at Kody, her jaw clenched, her rage evident. Janelle drummed her pen deliberately, measuring her move. Meri blinked her eyes tightly, as if reliving all the hurts. Robin leaned in only at last, shouting something desperately in Cody's ear. His face contorted, his lips compressed into a thin line. The jury filed out softly though, their gazes remaining on Kody as they exited, bearing with them the first fragments of a puzzle that could kill him. The prosecution had drawn blood, and everyone in the room sensed it. And while cameras outside snapped their shutters frantically, the world sat in anticipation of the next attack, aware the blaze was only just lit. The hush in the court hung like a stretched-out rubber band on the verge of snapping. The prosecutor allowed it to build, walking deliberately, the bundle of documents in his hand increasing its weight with each step. He knew the burden he bore. He knew the instant he set the file down, the atmosphere in the room would never be the same again. And when he at last pounded it onto the lectern, with a solid slam, the crack sounded like thunder. The gallery leapt. Pens of the reporters froze on sentences. The face of Kody Brown twitched, but he restrained himself from shifting, holding on to the side of the table as if his hands could keep him grounded through the tempest. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor started, his tone incisive, sounding across the courtroom with authority. What you are about to witness is not opinion. It is not guesswork. It is fact. Numbers don't lie. Documents don't manipulate. And these documents, he struck the thick file, will demonstrate to you that the picture of familial unity Mr. Brown has painted to the world is nothing but smoke and mirrors concealing financial fraud. The clerk slid the first stack of papers across to put onto the projector. The enormous screen at the front of the courtroom came to life. Rows of digits marched onto it. Account statements going back months, even years. All of the lines were transactions, transfers, hidden trails. The jurors leaned forward, trying to absorb it all. For the first time, their pens started to flow together, scribbling across notebooks like a chorus of suspicion. The prosecutor gestured with the tip of his pen. This transfer, $25,000, transferred from a joint family account to a private account in the name of Kody Brown. No signatures of the wives. No approval. No transparency. He paused, allowing the words to settle like a stone in water. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not how you shield a family. This is how you betray it. Christine gasped, her mouth opening as if the air had been stolen from within her lungs. She shook her head and inched forward toward Janelle. I said it, she breathed, her voice biting, shaking. Janelle nodded gradually, her pen scratching increasingly across the page. Meri sat upright, her back straight, her face blank, but her hands intertwined tight in her lap, her knuckles white. Robin, who stood closest to Kody, dropped her eyes to the table, her own eyes glistening, as if she couldn't bear to meet it. Kody snapped first. His hand came down on the defense table with a crack that resonated almost as loudly as the gavel had. That's not what happened. That was for taxes. It was for the land. His voice was raw, on the edge of desperation, pleading to anyone who would hear. His attorney reached for his sleeve, hissing low in his throat for him to sit down. The judge's gavel came crashing down, the wood crack echoing for silence. "Mr. Brown, you will not interrupt these proceedings again," the judge said firmly. The prosecutor, unfazed, gave himself the slightest smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen, observe how quickly the defendant responds when confronted with truth." He again faced the jurors, his tone even, measured. If these transactions were innocent, then why were they covert? Why were they shifted without a single utterance of honesty? Why did the other wives hear about them here today, in this courtroom? Another slide flashed on the screen. More figures, more money movements. The prosecutor's pen danced like a scalpel, cutting through each line. Here, $15,000 moved at midnight. Here, another $22,000 into an account that's connected with Coyote Pass. He spoke louder. "This is not an accident. This is a pattern of deception done in secret, while his wives were being reassured that everything was okay." Christine couldn't contain herself any longer. "I knew it," she cried out from her gallery seat. Her voice echoed off the walls before the judge's gavel called for quiet once more. Eyes were fixed on her, cameras capturing the flames in her face. The judge shot her a stern warning, but Christine didn't flinch. She sat straight, her eyes fixed on Kody, challenging him to tell her otherwise. The prosecutor moved on to property records. Maps of Coyote Pass came up on the screen, borders of land broken up into pieces, names scribbled in black letters across the plots. The red pen he held in his hand went around the sections slowly, carefully. "This land was to be the dream," he said, low even, gaining strength with each sentence. "It was to represent unity. A home where the family would live together at last. But what do we witness here?" His pen went around a portion marked under Robin's name. "What we witness is favoritism. We witness agreements made behind our backs. We witness one wife promoted while the others were deceived." The gallery burst out once more, the hum of murmurs reverberating from wall to wall. The term favoritism lingered in the air like a curse. Janelle's jaw tightened, eyes constricting as if she looked at the evidence of every fight she'd ever had with Kody. Meri shook her head slowly, eyes glistening, as if the paper maps were tangible evidence of a betrayal she'd lived with but never quite verified. Robin appeared as if she was about to fall, her lips shaking, her face white, eyes flitting between the screen and Kody. The prosecutor allowed the murmurs to swell before standing up loudly. "The defense will say these are coincidences, that these are misunderstandings. But ladies and gentlemen, don't let them insult your intelligence. Patterns don't occur by accident. 25,000 here, 15,000 there. Land titles changed, signatures gone missing, wives kept in the dark. This is not coincidence. This is intention." Kody sat still now, his gaze fixed on the screen, the muscles in his jaw grinding industriously. His attorney jotted notes, muttering strategies. But Kody didn't budge. He was like a man observing his kingdom dissipate before him in real time, piece by piece, number by number. The prosecutor went back to his desk, his steps methodical, unhurried. He piled his papers tidily, every sheet dropping into place with the smoothness of a honed blade. Then he faced the jury once more, his voice even, unshakable. "This case is not about faith. It is not about lifestyle. It is not about a television show. It is about trust. And when a man uses the trust of his family and manipulates it for his own advantage, that is not merely immoral. That is betrayal. When this trial comes to an end, and you understand it all, you will know the truth." Kody Brown was never defending his family. He was defending himself. The judge ordered recess, his gavel ringing out with the sound of a rifle shot. The courtroom erupted in motion. News reporters ran for the doors, their shouts pouring into phones as they dictated breaking news. Secret accounts revealed. Coyote Pass secrets shattered. Sister wives patriarch comes under fire. Cameras popped like fireworks, the tempest flowing from the courthouse out into the world beyond. But within, the wives did not stir. Christine crouched forward, hands clasped tightly, glare searing through Kody. Janelle drummed pen against notebook slowly, steadily, already thinking several beats ahead. Meri had her arms crossed, lips pinched into a line, eyes straight ahead, with hard determination. Robin tentatively extended her hand, brushing against Cody's arm, saying something wild, desperate, that no one else could hear. He didn't react. The jurors processed out, their expressionless faces, but their eyes revealing suspicion, even curiosity. They bore the weight of the evidence with them, sheets of figures still resonating in their heads. The prosecution had gotten blood, and everyone knew it. Kody remained motionless, yet his gaze moved to the envelope sitting on the prosecutor's desk, the unopened one. If what had just been uncovered was sufficient to spark the room into flames, then whatever was in there could reduce everything to ashes. The bailiff called the next witness, and the tension in the courtroom changed in an instant. The room hushed as Meri Brown stood up from her seat. She moved deliberately towards the witness stand, her heels clicking over the hardwood floor, each step counting down. The first wife, the woman who had once stood with Kody at the very start, the roots of the family, the one who had suffered longer than any of the others. For years she had remained quiet, her hurt hidden behind pained smiles on television screens. But today, here in this courtroom, there would be no editing, no producer telling her what to say. Today Meri was going to speak for herself. She sat down, fiddled with the microphone, and lifted her right hand to be sworn. Her voice shook ever so slightly as she promised to tell the truth, but her eyes never blinked. She glanced over the room, and fixed Kody. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw clenched, his hands tightly clasped together, as if he could prevent her words from being heard by the jury. But Meri was prepared. The prosecutor treaded carefully, as if with a fragile glass. "Mrs. Brown, could you explain to the jury, in your own words, what marriage to Kody Brown was like?" Meri drew a deep breath, her shoulders contracting and relaxing as if she had been holding it for years. At first, she started quietly. "It was all I imagined that it would be. We were young. We were in love. We thought we were creating something greater than ourselves. I felt I was special. I felt I was chosen." Her eyes flashed for an instant, a glimpse of the girl she used to be. But the memory soured quickly. Her voice turned cold. "But things changed. He changed. And I understood that I wasn't chosen. I was left behind." The jury scribbled furiously. The gallery leaned forward, straining not to miss a word. Even the judge seemed to soften, his stern posture easing as he listened. Meri continued, her voice steadier now. "I gave him everything, my trust, my loyalty, my love. And in return, he gave me distance. He gave me silence. He gave me rejection." She glanced at the jury, her lips tightening. "You all witnessed it. The world witnessed it. On television, on the interviews. You saw a man who pushed me to the side, who dismissed me like I wasn't worth anything. But what you didn't witness were the deceptions. The promises made in secret, broken. The finances moved without justification. The decisions made without me." Kody shook his head, saying under his breath, "That's not true." His attorney leaned in, telling him to remain silent. The judge's gavel snapped. "Mr. Brown, you will be silent or I will hold you in contempt." Kody leaned back, scowling at Meri, his lips squished into a line. The prosecutor nodded, telling her to go on. "Can you discuss the money?" Meri's face grew somber. "He kept telling us we were a family. We shared everything together, equal to equal, but I saw that things didn't balance out. Accounts with money missing from them. Land I had no idea about. I would question him and he would brush me off or make me feel bad for even asking. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. Like I didn't have the right to know what was real." The prosecutor moved closer. "And when you caught up with him," her voice broke. But she forged ahead. "He told me I was paranoid, that I was not grateful, that if I trusted him, I would not doubt him." She stared directly at Kody now, her gaze piercing. "But trust is a two-way street, and he never offered me his." The courtroom was silent, the force of her words sinking in. A reporter whispered somewhere in the gallery, "This is brutal," before a bailiff could quiet her. Then the prosecutor changed tactics. "Mrs. Brown, there has been some talk about a thing in your history. Can you tell the jury what went on with the catfishing scandal?" Meri clenched her jaw. A murmur ran through the gallery, but she set her chin and confronted the question. "Yes," she said bluntly. "I was catfished. I believed that I was talking to someone who cared about me, who noticed me, who respected me. It was a vicious trick. And for this, I was humiliated in public, shamed, dragged through the mud. But what nobody ever asks is why I was susceptible to that initially. Why did I seek validation beyond my marriage? Her voice had grown louder, firm and unshakable now. Because I was lonely. Because the man that I married had already left me. Because whenever I stretched out to him, he turned away from me. The world branded it as my treason. But I was betrayed long before that. I was alone in a marriage where my value was determined by how quiet I was, how much I could bear without complaining. The gallery erupted once more, the brutal candor of her words, shaking like an earthquake. The judge pounded his gavel, but even he couldn't suppress the flash of sympathy in his eyes. Meri faced the jury again, her voice unwavering. I'm not perfect, I did wrong. But my error was rooted in suffering, in abandonment, in years of being made to feel like I didn't exist. And as the world condemned me, he simply sat there, washing his hands of it, making himself out to be the victim. But he wasn't the victim, he was the perpetrator. Kody's face went red. His lips opened, but his attorney restrained him with a grip on the arm, causing him to keep his head down. His eyes seethed with anger. But silence spoke louder than words. The prosecutor tapped his pen on the podium for a moment before delivering his closing question. Mrs. Brown, if you had to tell this jury one thing about your marriage, what would it be? Meri leaned forward, her eyes scanning the jurors. That I loved him, that I gave him all of me. And he took my love and spent it like money, used it when it was convenient, threw it away when it wasn't. He built his reputation on the shoulders of women who believed him, who trusted him. And when the lights went down, when the cameras weren't rolling anymore, he left us to bear the burden alone. He betrayed me not only as a wife, but as a partner, as a human being. Her voice cracked then, a single tear tracing down her cheek. She rubbed it away hastily, refusing to disintegrate. The jury sat silent, their faces weighed down, their pens unmoving. The gallery remained frozen, all eyes upon her. The prosecutor retreated. No further questions, Your Honor. The defense lawyer quickly got up, realizing the harm caused. Mrs. Brown, he said cautiously, is it not a fact that you yourself confessed to a scandal that embarrassed this family, that what you did hurt Mr. Brown? Meri's eyes blazed. Yes, I admitted it. I took it. But the difference between us is I didn't lie about it. I didn't keep it hidden. I didn't hide it behind excuses. I met it head on. Can he do that? Slowly she turned her head toward Kody, her eyes piercing like a knife. The air was so thick it seemed as though time had come to a standstill. The defense lawyer stuttered in an effort to catch up. But the damage had been done. Meri hadn't just confessed. She'd made her confession into a weapon, and each juror had felt the cut of it. Finally the judge dismissed her. Meri stood, gathering herself, and walked past Kody on her way back to her seat. She didn't look away. Her eyes locked on his, until the very last step. Kody tried to hold her stare, but for the first time, he blinked first. Undefined the gallery, buzzed, reporters already scribbling furiously. The narrative writing itself. Meri speaks out. Betrayal exposed. And as she sat down, the courtroom knew something had shifted. The first wife had spoken, and her words had struck deeper than any piece of evidence could. The jury wasn't just seeing documents anymore. They were seeing the pain, the betrayal, the cost of Kody's choices. Undefined. The gavel struck, but the echoes of Meri's voice lingered in the air like a storm refusing to pass. When the bailiff summoned Christine Brown to testify, the mood in the courtroom changed like a whirlwind. She didn't walk hesitantly or guardedly. She strode. Her chin was raised, her shoulders thrown back, and her feet struck the floor with resolve. If Meri had been ice, frigid and icy with icy words, Christine was fire. The warmth seemed to trail behind her as she walked across the room, every gaze fixing on her. The jurors sat a little straighter in their chairs, anticipating what was to follow. Reporters aligned their recorders and pens, set to record the tempest. Christine lifted her right hand, took the oath with a firm voice, and sat down. The microphone shook slightly as she moved it, not by her hands, but by tension vibrating in the air. She scanned the room, directly at Kody. He ducked her eyes, looking instead at the table before him. But Christine did not care. Her voice, when it arrived, was as cold as ice. "I loved that man for decades," she said, her voice echoing across the hushed courtroom. "I gave him my youth, my energy, my loyalty. I raised children with him. I followed him to new cities. I sacrificed dreams for his vision. And in return, I was treated like an afterthought, like a burden, like the scraps on the plate after he had feasted elsewhere." The words cut through the air, and a ripple of whispers swept the courtroom. The judge slammed his gavel once, more in exasperation than anger, but to remind them that they were in a courtroom, not a drama. But even he looked forward, attentive. The prosecutor took a step forward, his voice coaxing. "Mrs. Brown, can you tell the jury what you meant by scraps?" Christine's eyes flashed with anger, and her voice grew louder, inspired by years of pent-up fury. "Scraps? Scraps equates to I saw everything go to Robin. Every dollar, every strategy, every bit of his focus. We were promised Coyote Pass would be our family aspiration, land where we'd all build together. But it was a lie. He funneled resources into Robin's household, while the rest of us were told to wait, to sacrifice, to be patient. We weren't wives, we were backup plans." Gasps echoed again. Robin flinched, shrinking into her seat, her lips pressed tight. Janelle lowered her eyes, nodding slightly, confirming in silence what Christine shouted in fury. Meri's expression hardened, her arms crossed tightly against her chest, almost as if to keep herself from breaking down. The prosecutor walked to the screen, and once again, maps of Coyote Pass appeared. The red lines divided the property, names scrawled across parcels. Christine rose a little from the witness stand, her finger pointing. "There, see how much was put on Robin's account, and see what the rest of us received. Empty talk, just promises." Her voice shook with emotion, but she didn't waver. She addressed the jury, her hands waving expressively. "Do you know what it feels like to dream about building a home, only to realize that the foundation was never meant for you? That the man you trusted was building walls to keep you out, not to let you in?" The jurors jotted down furious notes, others covering their mouths in shock. One juror was biting her lip, looking visibly shaken. Christine's words were not only testimony, they were a declaration of suffering that touched everybody. Kody finally looked up, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "That is not true. The land was always open to everyone. You left before it had a chance to be." Christine's head jerked around to him, her eyes flashing. "I left because you never meant to make it work." Her voice rang out so clearly that the judge instantly slammed the gavel down. "Mrs. Brown, you will not speak to the defendant," the judge admonished. But Christine did not break eye contact with Kody. She kept looking at him until he looked down again, vanquished in that silent battle. The prosecutor paused to let the moment hang before going on. "Mrs. Brown, can you tell me about the effect this had on your relationship with Mr. Brown?" Christine's voice softened for the first time, but the hurt was keener than ever. "It broke me. I was in a marriage where my heart didn't exist. I could scream and it would ring out into nothing. I could cry and he would turn his back. And when I finally just said, 'Enough,' when I walked away, he blamed me. He told me I was ruining the family. But the truth is, he ruined it long before I left." Her hands quivered slightly as she gripped the edge of the witness stand. "I didn't leave a marriage. I left a prison." The gallery agitated again, her raw words cascading over everyone. Journalists wrote furiously, one leaning to the other. "This is the headline. This is the soundbite." Christine's voice calmed, returning fiery. "I know what he'll tell me. He'll tell me that I was jealous, that I didn't want to share him. But I wasn't jealous. I was desperate for fairness. I was desperate for dignity. And when I saw him choose one wife, one family, one future, above the rest of us, I knew we were never equal. We were pawns, and Robin was queen." The flash of cameras outside the doors of the courtroom burst like firecrackers as news spread of her testimony. Inside, Christine's eyes welled up with tears she refused to shed. "You don't notice it when you're in it. You believe the promises. You hold on to the hope. But then one morning, you wake up and you see the truth. That he used the word of unity, not the practice. That he spoke of family while making division." The prosecutor paused to allow her words to breathe. then posed one last question. Mrs. Brown, what do you want this jury to know about your account? Christine gazed at them, her voice shaking with emotion but firm in its resolve. That this is not about polygamy. That this is not about religion. This is about power. He used faith as a shield, family as a weapon, and loyalty as leverage. And we paid the price. All of us. She gritted her teeth, fighting back the water that threatened to overflow her eyes. I want you to know what betrayal looks like. Because it's sitting right there at that table. She pressed her finger against Kody, her hand shaking with fury. The gallery gasped. The judge's gavel rang out hard, commanding silence. But the moment was etched into all of their minds. The sight of Christine, passionate and unwavering, pointing straight at Kody, would be repeated in news coverage, in headlines, in all conversations for weeks to come. The defense attorney rose quickly, desperate to regain control. Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you chose to leave this marriage? That your departure was your decision, not Mr. Brown's? Christine laughed bitterly, the sound as cutting as a slap. Yes, I left. I left for freedom, for dignity, for my children's future over invisibility in his. Her eyes flashed with anger, her voice slicing. Leaving wasn't betrayal, remaining would have been. The defense lawyer stumbled, rummaging through notes, looking for a reply that wouldn't materialize. Christine leaned back in her chair, her chest rising and falling, but her voice unshaken. You can spin it any way you like, but the fact remains. He destroyed us before I left the door. The judge then dismissed her, and Christine stood. She proceeded past Kody, without hesitation, never taking her eyes from his face. He attempted to glare her down, but her flames engulfed him. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't crack, and when she took her seat again, she sat slightly taller than before, as if she had shed a burden of decades in one testimony. The courtroom was charged with an energy so intense it seemed electric. The jurors looked at each other, their notebooks heavy with Christine's testimony. The gallery whispered wildly, reporters running out of the courtroom, already dictating. Christine Brown lets loose in court. Ex-wife accuses betrayal, favoritism, lies at Coyote Pass revealed. And as the gavel fell once more, the session of the day ended. But the reverberations of Christine's incendiary stand lingered on, flaming like fire that never would subside. Kody remained glued to the defense table, eyes shifting, lips compressed. His kingdom was crumbling, and with each witness, the fissures deepened. Christine hadn't testified, she had incinerated the earth, leaving nothing but embers remains. The defense attorney stood up slowly, zipping his jacket with a deliberate measured motion, as if to communicate to the jury that the tempest they just witnessed was going to be overpowered by reason. The room, still reeling from Christine's impassioned testimony, descended into an anxious silence. He strode to the middle of the courtroom, tall, his tone deep but authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen, what you heard is pain. True pain. Nobody will dispute that, but pain does not equal fraud. Anger does not equal crime. And betrayal of the heart, though sad, is not betrayal of the law. He hung the words there, allowing the jury a moment to catch their breath, to distance themselves from the whirlwind of emotion that Meri and Christine had created. His game plan was obvious. He needed to strip away the layers of showmanship and remind them of their responsibility. You are not here to determine if Kody Brown was a good husband. You are not here to determine whether or not polygamy is right or wrong. You are here to determine if a crime has been committed, and I present to you it wasn't. Kody sat up straighter now, his chest rising, his eyes flicking toward the jurors with a flash of hope. This was his side's turn. The defense attorney's voice softened, almost to the point of sympathy. Marriage, particularly a plural marriage, is messy. Feelings get hurt. Jealousies erupt, promises get broken, but does that make it fraud? Or is this just a family falling apart under the strain of unrealistic expectations and too much public attention? He moved towards the jury box, hands waving lightly, almost paternal. Consider. For years this family opened their doors to cameras. They let the world in on their struggles, their fights, their breakups, every vulnerability, every weakness, laid bare for millions to criticize. How many of you can last under such microscope without fissures developing? How many of you would be able to handle 4 wives, 18 children, and the pressures of fame without an error? He shook his head, speaking softly. Kody Brown is an imperfect person, but being imperfect is not a crime. Christine's eyes rolled from the audience, but the jurors were taking it all in. Some nodded slightly, recognizing the argument. The defense attorney jumped on it, his voice rising just enough. Now, the prosecution wants you to believe that bank transfers are proof of deception. But what are they really? They are tax payments. They are land investments. They are the actions of a man trying to build a future for a family so large, so complicated, that ordinary rules could never apply. Did he always communicate perfectly? No. Did he always make the wives feel included? No. But that implies that he stole from them. Right? No, it does not. He spun abruptly, gesturing toward the screen where financial reports continued to glow. See these figures. Not a dollar is missing. Not an account appears with funds vanishing into some hidden offshore paradise. Every cent can be accounted for. To land payments, to household spending, to debts any family of this size would find difficult to manage. Is that fraud, or is it survival? Kody's attorney let the question settle. The jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their pens held suspended for a moment. For the first time in hours, the gravity of evidence lessened, the passion-laden accusations muted by rational explanation. Then came the emotional turn. The attorney dropped his tone, quieter now. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're hearing from these women is heartbreak. It is betrayal, sure. But betrayal of love, not of law. They feel abandoned. They feel invisible. And for that, my client is guilty. Guilty of being human. Guilty of doing wrong in ways many husbands do. But this court is not a therapist's office. This court is not here to determine who hurt whom the worst. This court is here to determine whether a man violated the law. He turned toward Christine, his voice careful but probing. Mrs. Brown said she left because she felt invisible. She left because she believed he favored another wife. And perhaps he did, but favoritism is not a felony. Broken hearts are not indictments. They are tragedies, yes, but not crimes. Christine bristled, her eyes narrowing, but the jurors' faces remained thoughtful. The attorney moved next to Meri, gesturing respectfully. And Mrs. Brown, the first wife, she explained to you her loneliness, her humiliation. She shared with you a scandal that shook their marriage, yet even she confessed she was tricked by someone outside this family. She confessed her pain led her into the arms of another, even if it resulted in a catfish. Is that making Kody Brown a criminal? Or does that qualify him as a husband blindsided, like so many of the men before him? The courtroom was completely quiet, each word hitting with silence. The defense attorney took a step back, surveying the room. We can't put heartbreak on trial. We can't put bad marriages on trial. If we could, this courtroom would never be empty. He turned to Kody again, his gesture open to everyone. Not a monster, a man. A man who has attempted to keep together something most of us can't even fathom. A man who has erred, yes, but also a man who has given, who has cared, who has borne the weight of not one but 4 families. Ask yourselves, is this a criminal genius? Or is this a husband who failed to meet the expectations of 4 different women, under the scrutiny of millions of strangers? The jurors shifted once more, some looking at Kody, who nodded once, his eyes wide, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. The defense attorney pushed harder. The prosecution wants to have you think he's a thief, a manipulator. But where are the stolen millions? Where are the hidden offshore accounts? Where are the missing funds? There are none. What there is anger, resentment, and heartbreak. He paused, and then spoke in a raised voice, final in his tone. And while all those things might stuff tabloids, they do not fill courtrooms. You cannot convict a man because he broke hearts. You can only convict him if he broke laws. And I promise you, when this trial is over, you will see that he did not. For the first time in the trial, the jury's expressions softened. Their pens moved slower, their eyes lingering not on the prosecution's stack of papers, but on Kody himself. The defense attorney had done what he needed. He had humanized the man who had been painted as a villain. But just as the mood had seemed to change, the prosecutor jumped to his feet, waving a sealed envelope. The defense attorney stopped in mid-step. The envelope appeared normal. Just paper, sealed with a basic clasp. But the weight of it was impossible to deny. "Your Honor," the prosecutor asserted, his voice sharp in the silence. "Within this envelope are emails which have been written by Kody Brown himself. Emails in which he admits, in his own words, to moving funds without disclosure." The defense attorney's face went pale. Kody's posture grew rigid, his hands shaking ever so slightly. The jury inched forward, as if drawn on string. The gavel on the judge's bench cracked. "This court will adjourn until tomorrow morning. The contents of that envelope will be dealt with then." The crack of the gavel resonated like a death sentence. The gallery exploded in gasps, whispers, mad scribbling. Reporters ran for the exits, screaming into phones. Emails, secret emails. He confessed it in writing. And outside the courtroom, the crowd was afoot, cameras blazing as the news spread like wildfire. Within, the wives sat in mute shock. Christine's lips curled into the merest of smiles, a look of satisfaction momentarily crossing her face. Janelle grasped her notebook, her gaze fixed on the envelope. Meri breathed out deeply, her face inscrutable but weighted with vindication. Robin whispered close to Kody, her voice urgent, but he said nothing. His face was white, his chest rising and falling, his eyes fixed on the envelope. For the first time, the patriarch who once ruled a family, a TV show, and his own life story, seemed powerless. The envelope remained there on the prosecutor's desk, small but deadly, to be opened, and the world waited with it. The gavel came down, and the room shook with its strength. "Court is now in session." The voice of the judge was suspended in authority, but beneath it an anticipation that even he could not conceal. All knew what this day was about. The envelope that had sat on the prosecutor's desk like a ticking time bomb was finally to be opened. The gallery was packed more tightly than ever, reporters standing shoulder to shoulder, cameras clicking incessantly. Audiences around the nation were watching live, as they waited for the bombshell to destroy everything Kody Brown had created. The bailiff stepped forward, setting the envelope gently on the bench in front of the judge. Time halted for an instant. Kody gazed at it, his face ashen, his jaw so tightly clenched muscles quivered below his skin. His hands, which were often expressive with sweeping motions, rested flat and lifeless on the defense table. Robin leaned close to him, whispering urgently, but his eyes were fixed on that one sheet of paper. The judge pushed up his glasses and nodded to the prosecutor. "You may proceed." The prosecutor stood slowly, his hand unshaking, as he grasped the envelope. He inserted a finger under the clasp, opened it with glacial slowness, and pulled out the sheaf of printed pages. He said nothing at first. Instead, he held them aloft for the jury to witness. "These," he announced, his voice echoing with conclusion, "are emails authored by Kody Brown himself. His words, his confessions, his truth." The gallery gasped. Even the jurors, trained to remain composed, leaned forward collectively, their pens frozen above their notebooks. The prosecutor unfolded the first page, adjusted his glasses, and began to read aloud. July 12th. Subject transfers. From Kody Brown to an associate. Quote, "I've shifted the funds into the secondary account. Don't tell the others. They wouldn't understand. This is for the future. My future. Robin's future. The rest will figure it out later." End quote. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, cries, muttering filled the air until the judge's gavel came crashing down repeatedly. "Order, I will have order in this courtroom." But however much banging was done, words that were heard could not be wiped out. Christine's face glowed with ugly satisfaction. Her lips were pulled into a tight, triumphant smile. Janelle let her pen fall from her trembling hand, her eyes wide with shock. Meri took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes, but not from heartache, merely from the relief of finally being believed after all these years of uncertainty. Robin hid her mouth with shaking hands, her body coiling inwards, as if she wished she could just vanish. And Kody's face went pale. His lips opened a little, but nothing emerged. He was like a man observing his own funeral take place in front of him. The prosecutor raised another sheet, his voice steady, calm, merciless. September 3rd. Subject, land division. Quote, Robin must secure her lot first. The others can wait. If they complain, we'll frame it as a family plan. But the priority is her. That land is protection for us. End quote. The jury gasped this time. Some scribbled down furious notes, their expressions tightening. The burden of favoritism was no longer a matter of opinion or perception. It was in black and white, written on Kody's own hand. The prosecutor didn't stop. He flipped to another page. October 19th. Subject, payments. Quote, Meave $10,000 to cover Robin's mortgage. Don't log it in the family account. The others don't need to know. If they ask, we'll say it went to household expenses. End quote. The words sliced deeper than any testimony. They weren't accusations anymore. They weren't suspicions. They were confessions. Meri dropped her head, her shoulders shaking. By the time she did look up, her gaze landed on Kody, and the burden of years of deception filled that one glance. Christine muttered something beneath her breath, too softly to be picked up by the microphones, but the look in her eyes said it all. Janelle wrote one final note in her book, then ceased writing entirely, her pen going limp in her hand. The prosecutor addressed the jury. Brandishing the last page, his voice became lower, his words measured. And this email, members of the jury, is the most incriminating of all. November 28th. Subject, secrecy. Quote, They'll never find out. As long as I keep control of the narrative, the wives will follow. They always do. And if one leaves, so what? The show must go on. The money stays with me. End quote. The subsequent silence was deafening. The jury remained stilled, pens unmoving. The courtroom was completely still, all eyes fixed on Kody. Even the judge settled back slowly in his seat, his face betraying the seriousness of what he had just heard. The prosecutor set the pages down, his voice ringing with conviction. These are not the words of a man defending his family. These are the words of a man defending himself. A man using trust, concealing money, and playing favorites among wives. This is not love. This is not leadership. This is betrayal. The judge gave the jury a moment to catch up, then addressed the defense. Does the defense want to cross-examine? Kody's lawyer stood, but his face was pale, his hands shaking minutely as he adjusted his tie. Your Honor, these emails, the prosecutor interrupted curtly, are genuine, tested by forensic specialists. Their metadata verifies they were authored from Mr. Brown's own email account. We have notarized affidavits to authenticate them. The defense lawyer stumbled, the words on his lips stuttering. We will have to review. The judge held up a hand. You will get your opportunity. But right now, the evidence is on the table. Kody leapt to his feet, his voice breaking, brash, frantic. You don't get it, you have no idea. I had to do it. I had to keep things running, or the whole thing would have collapsed. His words thundered around the room, rough and frayed. I did it for the family, for all of us. The judge banged the gavel a second time, his tone stern. Mr. Brown, you are going to sit down at once, or I will find you in contempt. Kody's chest rose and fell, his hands shaking as his attorney yanked him back into his seat. His eyes scanned frantically around the room. To the jury, to the wives, to the journalists scribbling notes furiously. His empire, his carefully constructed persona, his hold on control, all of it was falling apart, before his very eyes. The prosecutor slammed the folder shut, his tone low but biting. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will speak for itself. The judge announced another recess, and the gavel rang out like the clang of a funeral bell. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Reporters dashed for the exit, yelling headlines into their phones. Emails uncover Kody's secret betrayal. Favoritism proved in his own words. The show must go on. Kody's damning admission. Outside, groups of protesters and supporters fought, their voices rising into a whirlwind of chants. Justice for the wives, one group shouted, and another. Leave Kody alone. News trucks blocked the street, anchors calling in live with the courthouse behind them, their voices urgent, panting. Within, the wives responded differently. Christine sat upright, her lips compressed into a thin line, the blaze in her eyes unyielding. Janelle shook her head slowly, her skin pale, her pen tapping out a rhythmic beat on the notebook she hadn't picked up since the emails were read. Meri cried quietly, wiping at tears on her cheeks but never leaving her eyes from Kody. And Robin fell into her chair, crying softly, her hand wrapped around Cody's arm as if holding on to him would prevent her from sinking. Kody sat rigid, his frame shaking, his eyes fixed on the desk before him. But he wasn't looking at documents or pens. He was looking at his empire crumbling, his wives against him, his kids observing in the distance, the world ridiculing the fall of the man who used to profess oneness and dominion. The recess lingered, but the whispers never ceased. Everywhere whispers spread of the emails, of the words that should not have been spoken. Even in silence, the proof screamed. When the judge did return, the room fell silent once more. The gavel fell again. Court will reconvene tomorrow. The jury will reach a verdict soon. Until then, this court is adjourned. The bang resonated throughout the room, but there was no movement at first. Everyone was stuck, immobilized by the gravity of what they had just seen. It wasn't until the bailiff spoke that people started to shuffle, their footsteps heavy, their voices subdued. Kody moved slowly, his pace sluggish, as if the air itself around him had thickened. Robin grasped his arm, her voice shrill with distress, but his expression was empty, his eyes vacant. He resembled less a patriarch, and more a man waiting to be sentenced. The wives walked out individually, none of them glancing his way. Christine didn't even try to conceal her smirk. Janelle strode out quickly, her face inscrutable. Meri hung back for a moment, staring at Kody with a look of sorrow and victory, before turning and leaving quietly. The photographers outside burst with flashes, journalists yelling above each other. Kody, did you compose those emails? Christine, do you feel vindicated? Meri, will you testify again? The frenzy never let up, the tempest unstoppable. Undefined. And as Kody was led away, flanked by guards, the world already had its answer. The emails were the coup de grace. His words, his secrets, his own pen had brought him down. But the question that hung suspended like a thundercloud remained. Would the jury interpret these emails as betrayal of the heart, or betrayal of the law? Would they come down on the man, but also on the empire he had constructed? Undefined. The courtroom doors closed. The lights were turned low, and the world waited for the verdict.